Okay, so this video is about a very versatile intervention tool called the Incredible 5-Point Scale. Okay, so this is an emotional regulation tool that you would use with a student who's struggling in a particular situation. So it might be that they're struggling to regulate their feelings of anger, feelings of anxiety, or maybe to speak at an appropriate volume. What we're trying to do is help the students develop a sense of self-awareness. So how they're feeling in a particular situation, but then also what strategies they can use to get themselves out of that situation. Okay, so if we take a student who has extreme anger as an example at this moment, the 5 on the scale would be when they are at their most extreme emotion, so when they are most angry. And what we're trying to help the students understand is that before they reach their most extreme emotion, they will have moved through other emotions. We're trying to make them acknowledge those other emotions and use them as a signpost to get out of a situation. For example, before a very angry child has reached 5 on the scale, they might have moved from being happy to annoyed to upset to very annoyed to out of control. And what we need to try and do is give them enough self-awareness to realise where they are on the scale so that they can remove themselves from a situation when they are a 2 or a 3 at the scale, when they're much easier for us to negotiate with as a member of staff, rather than waiting till they get to 4 or 5 on the scale, which makes it harder for us as staff. So filling in this tool needs to be a highly personalised exercise. The students need to be thinking what they look like when they are moving up the scale, how it feels to them when they're moving up the scale. And we need to have this conversation when they're calm and rational, and we need to get them to try and identify what would help them at different stages of the scale. So this is not only a very valuable conversation to have with the student to show that we are invested in them and that we want to help them, it also allows us to give the student some responsibility for their behaviour. So strategies that they can use, tools that they can employ to help them make better decisions. So here's an example of a completed 5-point scale. So as you can see, the student has put it into their own language, and that is really important. So instead of happy, the students use "this never bothers me." Instead of a bit annoyed, they've used "this sometimes bothered me." So there's freedom there for the student to put it in their own words so that they have personalised it. So as we move from the bottom of the page to the top, when we think about what makes me feel this way, we can see that it is a slow progression of anxiety or frustration building. So the student goes from being happy to the sound of rain on the roof, when I can't have my turn right away, and walking on the power walk. When I hear the boys talking louder as we move up to 3, when the chairs or desk scrape on the floor, when someone laughs out loud. We're getting up to 4, when the boys all laugh at one time, when I can't do my work, when I make a mistake. So what we can see here, we're at 4, what we can see here is that the student has a really good insight actually into the progression of things that can frustrate them. And we can then begin to develop our understanding of, okay, well maybe they're talking too loudly. I wonder how this student's feeling at this point. Perhaps that nervous feeling that he describes is starting. So it really benefits us in working with the student as well. And then the student's description of what his triggers for 5 are things like when loud talking and laughing keeps happening, school bells and the smell of fish. So strong sensory influences on the student there, and things that we might not be aware of unless we did this piece of work to get that information from the student. And then how can I tell? The student's given us amazing information that we can use to really support the students as they're building up to a time of crisis. So some of the things where we start at 2, they're internal. So my stomach kind of hurts and I start repeating the TV guide schedule. Okay, so we can become attuned into what that looks like. Maybe he's gone quiet. Maybe he's reciting the TV guide. Then when we move up to 3, what that looks like, how we can tell that student's at 3, they've told us really helpfully that they will say shut up really quietly and they'll start staring at the boys. My brain starts thinking about the boys too much. So we've got an opportunity there to intervene. So what we have there are lots of little clues along the way for us to be aware of as staff, but also for the students to start developing that self-awareness before we get to the swearing loudly, saying mean things, or, as the student so well describes, at 5 when it's too late, I am screaming. So as you will have noticed, some of these formats are different. Some students would prefer a more visual representation. So here, cartoon characters have been used to show the different faces for the different emotions. But the key thing is that we're always thinking about what strategy to employ at what point in the scale. So how can students use these tools? Well, some students find these little cards helpful, and you can prompt the student throughout the day, where are we on the scale? Let's get our laminated cards out. There's also an opportunity to make a miniature version of their 5-point scale so that they can keep it in their pencil case or discreetly look at it on the desk. But what we're doing there is making them aware, keeping it at the forefront of their minds. How am I feeling? And how can I regain control of this situation? So as staff, we can use this in lots of different ways. Firstly, in those really valuable conversations. Secondly, we can use this anxiety curve model. Okay, so I'll send out this anxiety curve for you to look at in more detail. But the basic premise of this is that actually when a student is at 4 and 5, we aren't going to be able to reason with them. So that isn't the time to ask the student to make choices. It isn't the time to try and problem solve with the student. What we are trying to do there is relax the student, calm the student down, and not directly handle any of those behaviours that are happening at that crisis point. When we need to pick up those behaviours later is when a student is at 1 or 2, when we can use their rational mind to work through, well, how did it go wrong? Essentially what it does do though is it allows us to feel empowered in situations and gives us as members of staff strategies to employ as the student goes through the peak of crisis and works their ways up the scale. So just briefly, because there's a real danger of me talking too much, how it can support noise regulation is by giving the students a scale of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for different volumes of their voice. You can use that preemptively as you're setting up a task. So this task will be a 3 task. Oh, we're at a 5 at the moment. We need to work down to a 3. Some people choose to use it in this visual form like we have here. So as you can see, it's really nicely separated into inside voice and outside voice. This teacher's done that really nicely. Those are not my lovely nails. I've borrowed that from a website. And basically it's a really visual reminder for the student with an arrow that's stuck on with Velcro down the side to help the student with what level their voice should be at. So I hope that made sense and was interesting. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks very much. Bye.